Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July webcast on the Agile Central community. My name is Lynn, and I work in product marketing for Agile Central. With me here today is Lynn Keys from the customer success team. She will be presenting on proper portfolio manager setup and best practices so you can improve team-level predictability and more effectively scale work across your organization. For those of you who joined our August 2017 webcast, Lynn actually presented on a similar topic, so this is a refresh session. And for those of you who are new to this monthly webcast series, these webcasts typically consist of a presentation and demo combo given by someone from our customer success, product management, pre-sales, or education team on how to use or better use various features and functionalities within Agile Central. And these webcasts are designed for Agile Central users just like you. We encourage Q&A, so please submit your questions in the Q&A panel on the WebEx screen to the right, and we'll cover questions at the very end of the presentation. And just as a reminder, this will be recorded, and the replay will be available on the Agile Central community, so you can rewatch at a later time or share with your colleagues. And with that, I will hand it on over to Lynn.
Hello, good morning and or good afternoon, depending on where you're at today. My name is Lynn Keys, and as Caitlin said, I am one of the customer success managers for the Agile Central product line, otherwise known as Rally. We'll be talking about the portfolio manager today and best practices and how it works best when you set it up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is the 5 levels of Agile planning. So we talk about, the question is, are your business strategy and your development aligned? So what does that mean exactly? So if you look at this from the 5 levels of Agile planning, these levels fit directly into the Agile Central Portfolio Manager. So we start at the top at the product vision, which is a theme level, and that timeline is anywhere from 1 to 5 years. It's very broad. There's no specifics. It might have larger topics. It depends on what your company is doing, and it's kind of far-reaching into the future. Then we go down into the product roadmap, which fits in line with the initiatives. Initiatives are typically 1 to 6 quarters. They're usually finished within that timeline. It's really important that when we get into the lower levels of this, that you look at how your business is currently sizing these items and that you're consistent across the board. The next level down is the release planning, which features fall into that. So otherwise known as, it could be a PI planning timeline. Here at Rally, we have our PI planning once a quarter, so all of our features fit into that 3-month time box, again, which is that release planning. Then you go down further into the team level, which is iteration planning, and that's to the 2 to 4 week time box. And within those time boxes, you're completing user stories. And then you get the daily commitments, which are at the team level as well, and the tasks, and that's usually a day at a time. So when you're looking at your different items and the different sizing of them, a couple of things you want to look at is how do you know that the dev teams are working on the right things? And how do you know if the features that are being worked on are going to be delivered? And then do the dev teams know how that the work that they're doing is tied to the business and that it supports the business needs? So with that, we will continue on here. So when we talk about scaling throughout an organization, it's a great thing, it's a beautiful thing when it works. But what we like to tell our customers is that you have to start at the team level. That is the base of everything that goes on within your organization and your ability to predict what's going to happen with your development throughout its life cycle. So we look at 4 different categories. We look at your planning, your predictability, visibility, and scaling. And it all starts at the team level. So if we look down at the bottom, you've got your releases, which again, that falls into that quarter timeline, and then the iterations, and it can be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, depending on your company. Then you start working on the stories and then the tasks. That is at the team level. And the goal here, again, is to see that these teams become predictable iteration over iteration. that allows the business to be able to see, hey, we're able to create X amount of features every quarter or every year, and that makes the business it's very stable. Okay. All right. Then we need to be able to have a bridge that connects the work that the teams are doing to the strategy of the business. The teams are executing from sprint to sprint, but that's too short of a time box for the business to be able to, switch and say, hey, we need to adjust, we need to move and change the direction that we're going. So we need that mid-tier time box, which is the portfolio manager. All right. And if you look at this, it's a little bit different visual, but it shows you still the levels of plan, the Agile planning, the themes, the initiatives, features, and stories, all the way down to the bottom. That's where we add the value, is that intermediate time box that allows the business to be able to plan and on a cadence and be sure that the teams are executing as they should. And that builds confidence throughout the organization that the work the teams are committing to is being completed time box over time box. Okay. When you look at the timelines for this, you look at the themes don't have a start and end date because they're such a broad topic, but when you get down into the initiatives, then you start adding a start and end date, and you have a feel for, we're going to complete these larger initiatives in that 1 to 6 quarter time box, and the features again in that quarterly time box. So you're getting the feedback on how the work is progressing with the teams, and then that's the predictability that the teams are bringing offers that stability to the organization. So this is these are the slides I wanted to show you on the portfolio. I'm going to get out of here, and I'm actually going to go into our demo site, if you can bear with me one moment. All right, so let's get this expanded a little bit. All right, so where I'm going to start today with this is we're going to actually start in the project hierarchy, because this is where you set up your value streams as an organization. And this is really important for how all of the work is viewed throughout the application and the ability to see what is going on throughout the entire organization and your work streams. So we created a demo site that is pretty basic. It's an online store. That would be your company name. So the company name is the top level. That is usually always the way it should be, because you want everything to roll up so that your executives and anyone that needs to see everything that's going on within the organization can be seen from that top level. And then you'll see that we have 3 projects listed below. And when I talk about projects, it's not as the typical project, but it's again where work is where software is being developed or things are being created. So these are the 3 value streams that we created: consumer site, platform, and reseller. And you can go 10 levels deep on this hierarchy. I haven't seen that yet, where I see people they make their organizational structure really large. So a couple things to keep in mind is, make sure that the projects that you have listed in your hierarchy they're still active. There's work being done in those. If they're not, you can hide those. You can archive them. But just to keep it simple for the folks that are working within this hierarchy, that they can see what they need to. One thing to keep in mind is that the team should always be the bottom node of every project. That is where the work is flowing to. A lot of times I hear folks say that they can't see things. They can't see what's going on. Say that you've got work that's being done in both the consumer site and the reseller site. You've got teams that are shared through those. That is absolutely the way it's set up to work. So you should never have a problem with the visibility. So if you're having issues like that, get with your customer success manager, and we can help walk you through that. That's a lot of times where we see where folks are struggling. And usually it comes in line with where the setup is here. So just wanted to cover that briefly, but again, if you have questions, you can ask some questions later or get with your customer success manager. The next thing we want to look at is the portfolio timeline. I hear a lot of folks that say, I can't, our executives are looking for us to pull reports out of Rally and to be able to see what's going on with the development across the organization. This is where you should be going for that. This should be everything that you need to know about all the development that's going on within your organization. This is what it's set up for. You can set up milestones on here if you need to see things like that, but anything from the top level, and it depends how many portfolio items you have or how many layers of portfolio that you have. Doesn't look like, we apologize, we don't have any themes on this one, but it'll show you all the levels from the very top all the way to the bottom. If you're missing things on your timeline, you need, and we'll talk about this in the portfolio items, but everything that is in play should be showing up here. Any of the levels within the portfolio manager should be showing up on this timeline, and if there's not, there's some reasons why we'll talk about in a minute. But from an executive perspective, you can see from the top level down where you're at, and if you look down here in the legend, you see that some of this stuff is just planned, and since it's a demo environment, there's not a lot of stuff in here, but it'll show you if you're late on some of the work items, you're at risk, or if you're on track, or you've completed it. So this should be the main place that you go to. Looks like we might be having some changes on this at some point in the future that will be able to show us some dependencies, which will be cool, but for right now, this is a view of everything that's going on within your organization. All right, the next thing we're going to go to is the portfolio items. So this is where you're setting up all of the levels of your portfolio. You can add any of the new items here. You can add themes. You can add, all the way down, whichever you choose. So a lot of times your product folks will be working on this, other folks as well. This depends on who you have managing this, okay? So you can add new here. This will show you all the levels deep. So a couple things to keep in mind. Again, if you want these items to show up on your portfolio timeline, you have to have a start and end date. And typically what I tell people is you might have an actual start date and a planned, or actual start date and a planned end date, or you might just have a planned start and end date. But you have to have both of them for them to show up on the timeline. So if you're missing stuff, that's the first place you should come is here. The next thing is you can see the project, what project it's part of, any of these items. So when you have, say, between the consumer site and this is our other things here. So we have consumer site, you can see online store, which is the top level. So you can have any of your projects within your project hierarchy showing up here. It's kind of how each person can set it up as they want to see it. You have whatever's relevant for you, okay? And let me just show you that real quick. If you want to add any of the columns here, you can just add the ones that are checked in blue are already there. So if we want to add, say, an actual end date column, you just apply it. It's very simple to add whatever you need on here. The other thing is you want to make sure that you're including the features in the releases, and so that you have those identified. So again, if you're missing data, you kind of have to walk through it methodically and see why is it not showing up. Is that feature actually being worked on? Has it been included in a release? Has it not been included in a release? And then let's look at these. So the percentage of done is always based on the user stories. So if you've got, I see folks that they might have 20 user stories under a feature, but they don't actually have, those user stories aren't assigned either to an iteration, or they don't have any story points. So if the story points aren't showing up or it's looking kind of wonky, make sure that you check all of your user stories and make sure that they've been sized. Because it might show that you're at 100%, but that's only because you have, everything that you've listed as a story point for, say half of those stories. Say 10 stories have a story point on them, and the other 10 don't. It'll show 100% even though you've got the other ones that aren't completed yet. So keep an eye on that. And let's see. Again, you can filter. You can add filters here for adding additional work views. You can choose your fields by any of these, and then you can, let's see, if we want to say, I want to choose by project, and then it'll allow me to break that out by project. So you can always see different views in here. Between the filtering and the columns, I usually can make sure that people can see most everything, okay? Then the other thing that I want to talk to you about is the sizing. So we talked about that in the overall Agile planning, the Agile onion. And so the biggest thing is you can size your initiatives to that's a little bit larger, but definitely the features and the user stories. I had folks that they were having problems with their features, but when I looked to see how they had them sized, they had different people throughout the organization that were adding the features, and they were sizing them very differently. So you want to have that sizing convention, per se, set up within your company so everybody understands a feature fits into this box. It's 1/4, or if it's variable, you can make it a little bit different, but as long as everyone's doing the same timeline. This particular customer had a feature that would be completed in 1 day, a month, 6 months, and then a year. So it was very inconsistent, and so it was causing a lot of problems with their reporting. So make sure that you are checking on that and that it's consistent throughout the organization. And then other customers have specific people that they have that are only allowed to add features and things like that. So again, it's however you're looking at that. So this is where you manage it. I want to show you one other, the portfolio Kanban. So this is another way to manage this. So you've got, usually it's one or several people managing what's being worked on when. So the prioritization. So this is a nice view that you can look in here. We've got expedited lanes in here as well. So you can manage all of the work that's being done, when the features are going to actually go into play, so that way you can keep track of them. The other thing that I would suggest you look at is if you're using the release planning, which is specific to features. So we have it set up so it's a 1/4 or 3 months, and another way to manage it this way. So if you're you're doing the release planning, keep in mind that we call the release, it's a release. It's just another time box. It's not where code is actually being released. So for us at Rally here, it's a continual release of software. So it's not like an event that happens at the end of a quarter. So just keep in mind. So I would suggest if this is something that you're currently doing, you can play with this and see. It's just like any other Kanban. You can move the cards around, and it makes it really easy for folks to track and use. So all these pages are the same, so you can add columns, you can add items to the cards, and you can filter. So that is the portfolio in a nutshell, but just to recap a couple things, again, make sure that you've got your sizing correct on all of your portfolio items, that you're consistent. One other thing here is you can have more layers than this in your portfolio if you choose. I recently reviewed someone who had 6 levels of portfolio. It starts becoming a little more complicated as far as timing, so you have to make sure that each item is set for a specific amount of time to be completed. So if the feature level is always the bottom level, that's 3 months. So everything just goes up from there. So you have to make sure that you have all of those laid out and you understand the timing for each of them. So we tend to say keep it simple because sometimes when you get too many layers in there, it becomes real complicated and people lose themselves in all of the details. But you can also name these differently. They do not have to be what you see here: feature, initiative, and theme. So with that, I've kind of covered a lot of things in here. So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment, and then let's see if you guys have some questions.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So while we're waiting for a few more moments for folks to ask their last-minute questions, I'd just like to share some of the great resources that we have so you can keep in touch with us for Agile Central updates and more. For those of you who haven't already, please join our Agile Central community. The URL is listed here, and I always find it helpful to bookmark it. We have a monthly customer newsletter sharing product updates, upcoming events, learning and education opportunities, and more. And you can subscribe to this monthly newsletter by finding this image chip on the front page of the communities and clicking on subscribe. And as you already know, since we're doing it right now, we have a monthly community webcast series. To RSVP for upcoming month's webcasts or view webcasts from past months, on the front page of the communities, click on the webcast icon that's listed here. So with that, I'll pass it back to Lynn to answer some of the questions that came through.
All right, let me take a look here. Give me one moment. So there's a couple things. I might have to get back to some of you on this. If I don't answer your question, I will provide the list, or Caitlin and I will provide a list of the questions, because some of these I might have to do a little checking on. The first one was from Ed, when did you change from capabilities to initiatives? I'm assuming you're talking about portfolio initiatives, so that I don't know right now. If that's what you're meaning, I will check on that. I'm not aware of that changing. As long as I've been here, it's been initiatives, but that might have been an older terminology. Let's see, Kathy, you asked, what is a layer? I'm not sure. Can you give a little more information on that? Because I'm not sure what layer you're talking about. I apologize, because some of these are hard to get in context. Apologize, I'm still reading through these. So the one question is, from a SAFe perspective, where would you put the value streams? That was at the, so for our example, on the demo, it was at the, you have your online store, which is the top level, or the company level. The value streams are the consumer, reseller, and platform. So that's that next layer down. That's from a SAFe perspective. So from the number of levels down, so when I'm talking about levels down in the hierarchy, we only show basically 3 levels down, which was the online store, the consumer site, and then the team. That's 3 levels. You can go down many more layers there, but it's going to depend on how your structure is set up. You might have, an example might be, say, the consumer site, and then you might have a product line as the next layer down. And the next layer down might be a specific product, or it might be a subset. So you might have multiple levels of product lines. So it might be at a departmental level, and then it might be down further. So if you have more questions on that, just let me know. And any of you can feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions specifically that we're not addressing. Some of these I have to check, so I apologize. I'll be scrolling through. The names of the portfolio items are changed. If you're a sub-admin, you can change that. It's going to be under setup, so you'll have to have someone who's a sub-admin that can go in there and change those for you. And I think that's it, Caitlin, for right now. The rest of these I will have to respond back after the call.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, excellent. Thanks, Lynn, for your thorough presentation. And also thank you to everyone who took the time to join the community webcast today to learn more about portfolio manager setup and best practices. Please join us next month for our August webcast, where my teammate from the pre-sales team will be presenting on the topic of capacity planning and plan progression. So be on the lookout for that. And thanks again, and bye for now.